Hey, I love therapy, and in fact, I've been going to therapy since I was around 6 years old. Though I talk about therapy a lot and may interview some therapists on the show on occasion, nothing that is said in this podcast should be considered a replacement for therapy. If you are struggling, I urge you to please seek guidance from a therapist because you are absolutely worth it. Dating, relationships, sex, and self-love. I am your host, Rachel Dalton, coming at you from my new desk setup, which is pretty exciting. I hope everybody's doing well. I am exhausted. I feel like I say this once a month, but I just continue to be completely in awe at how I feel like my mental state, my energy levels, just my well-being really is run by my menstrual cycle, run by the moon. A little woo-woo up in here already, but you know what you're getting when you sign on for this podcast. Anyway, yeah, I am exhausted. Life is moving. It's good. There are good things. There are shitty things. It's just this big basket of mixed things that are happening, I guess. Can you tell that I'm exhausted and that I need a break from recording and posting and editing and all of those things? They really don't tell you how much work goes into a podcast behind the scenes, but let me tell you, it's a lot, and I'm tired. So this is the penultimate episode before I go on my little summer break that I've set up for myself, and I need it. So I'm excited to take July and August to just kind of do some traveling that I had planned, spend some time with my family, spend some time with my partner, etc., etc. But before that, we have 2 more episodes to do. Today, I am super excited to introduce my guest, Amy Reiley, who is one of the leading experts, if not the leading expert, actually, I believe, in aphrodisiacs. So we talk about aphrodisiacs. Are they a myth? Are they real? What constitutes an aphrodisiac? And what does all of that look like? How can you apply these things to your own life to improve your sex life? So that's what we have on today. But before that, I just wanted to revisit something that we had talked about briefly in a prior episode. I've just been doing some more thinking about. We had done some talking, well, I had done some talking about different types of therapy. There's CBT, there's DBT, there's parts therapy, there's EMDR, which I'm doing. And I kind of talked about how my Tuesdays are for looking forward and my Thursdays are for looking back. And, I had this realization in the last week, and it was a very kind of heavy therapy session because of that. But I had this thought that there are no guarantees that you're going to have a good life and that you're going to figure your shit out. Sometimes things happen and you have no control over them. But I've spent a lot of my life thus far looking at all the things that have happened and thinking, but why did that happen to me? That this is so unfair. Why isn't there any justice? And focusing a lot on that, and I've kind of realized, doing some of that is normal and helpful, but I don't want to spend my life doing that. I want to take what I've been given and to make the most of it. Because I think that if I keep thinking and focusing on how unfair things are and how justice is needed in these different situations, I think that can lead to a lot of suffering. And my therapist and I were talking about how pain and joy are both, equal parts of life. And sometimes you go through seasons where there's more pain or you go through seasons where there's more joy. But what she said, because she specializes in DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, she said that pain is a natural part of life, but pain plus being stuck and ruminating on the unfairness of it all leads to a prolonged period of suffering. And, you know, there are people I've seen in my life and, you know, TV or different stories that I read who do get stuck in this idea of fairness and why is this the way that it is? And it's natural to some extent, but I've realized that if I stay on that path of focusing on that rather than making the best out of which I've been given, that it could lead to a really unhappy life. I'm not just going to wake up one day and figure it out. I have to kind of go through those steps of figuring it out by myself. It's not just like you hit 40 and you're like, oh, I understand all the secrets of the universe, which is kind of naively what I thought it was like when I was a kid. So yeah, I'm just thinking about things a little bit differently, about how, yes, a lot of bad things have happened in my life. I have a fair amount of trauma, but that doesn't get to define my life. And nothing that I'm saying is like revolutionary, but it's just one of those things that when you kind of discover it for yourself, it starts to sink in a little bit more. So what I'm trying to start to do is, I think I said this quote from my favorite author, Cheryl Strayed, a few weeks ago, but it's this idea that you are not entitled to the cards that you think that you should have been dealt, but you do have the obligation to play the hell out of the hand that you're holding. And I kind of want to start changing my mindset, thinking less about the mindfulness and the rumination of the anxiety, which, you know, like I said a couple episodes ago, or maybe it was the last episode, I don't know, time is a construct, that, you know, sometimes CBT and just talking and ruminating isn't great for people who have trauma or OCD or anxiety, and I have all three. So yeah, I don't know, just kind of an interesting, you know, I started that conversation on the podcast prior and then have been thinking more about it in my life. This is what goes on in my head. I wish that like what went on in my head was thinking about, I don't know, like sports games or work or something that was more tangible and easy to understand. But no, it's these very abstract life philosophies that just keep me up at night. So that's super fun. But what my therapist and I also talked about was this idea about acceptance. Acceptance makes it easier to not ruminate, get caught up in the why is this happening to me? Why is life so unfair? Accepting is a huge part of DBT. And so that's something that my therapist and I are going to be leaning into in the coming weeks. Thursdays are for EMDR and looking backwards and trying to clear a lot of these traumatic memories to desensitize myself to them. And Tuesdays are for looking forwards and starting to focus on acceptance and making the most out of what I've been given. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. So I invite you, the listener, to consider where is an area where you might feel stuck. Where is an area where you can practice some gentle acceptance? Where is an area where you can't go back and you can't change the past, but you can change how you look at it going forward and how you move going forward? Just a thought, just a thought, just some things to consider. That's what's going on in my brain these days. And yeah, if you feel up to it, go ahead and email me, send me a DM. I'd love to hear what aha moments you're having. So, okay, gonna keep that intro pretty short today. But anyway, back to my guest today, Amy Reiley, Aphrodisiacs, leading expert in food and sex. We talk about the history of food and sex. We talk about what an aphrodisiac is. We talk about why it's a myth. We talk about how different aphrodisiacs affect people different ways. We get into all of it. So super excited to share that with you. I do want to apologize right off the bat. I just spent like an hour trying to figure out how to edit some, I don't even know if it's background noise or if it's just like static, but I won't bore you with like the editing details, but because the noise happens when we're speaking rather than in the background, it's a lot harder to edit out. So clearly I need to take a class in Audacity and doing some podcast editing. Maybe that's something I'll do in my little sabbatical this summer, because I want to deliver clean audio to you, my listeners, who take the time out of your day to listen to these conversations. And I want it to be, I mean, maybe it's not going to be emotionally pleasant to listen to all the time. Different episodes have different reactions, but I do want it to at least not, be painful on the ears. So let me work on that. But for this particular episode, my apologies for that. And I will strive to get better at my editing skills on this break. Gonna add that to my to-do list right now. Okay, everyone, thank you for being here today. And I'm going to cut to a quick commercial break, and then please enjoy my conversation all about aphrodisiacs with Amy Reiley.
Sex. Pleasure. These words evoke intense emotions, but not everyone can easily access them. Many face challenges on their sexual journey, such as overcoming religious and social taboos, physical disabilities, and sexual trauma. At Wellness and Desire, we believe sexual pleasure is not only healthy, but a basic human right and can be experienced in a plethora of ways. Whether it's finding the right toy, lube, or educational resource, we are here to help you overcome any obstacle. Explore wellnessanddesire.com and unlock the transformative potential of your sexual empowerment today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am so excited today to talk to someone who I've been wanting to have this topic discussed on the show before, and so I'm jazzed to jump into it. Today, I have Amy Reiley with me. How are you doing today?
Hi, good morning. Well, it's morning for me. I don't know what time.
It's early afternoon for me, but that's okay. So, Amy, today we're going to be talking about aphrodisiacs, and I am like, 100 some episodes into the show right now. And we did an episode on aphrodisiacs like in the very beginning, but that was before we transitioned to this new platform where it's an interview style podcast. So you're the first expert I'm having on about aphrodisiacs.
Oh, this is exciting.
It really is. And it was something that hadn't occurred to me to bring up, but my boyfriend messaged me and was like, "Hey, have you heard about this Tabs chocolate stuff?" And I was like, yeah, I don't really know if it works or anything. And then I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to jump on, this platform that I use to find guests and see if there's somebody on aphrodisiacs. And there you were. So
yay.
Thank you for being here today.
Of course.
To start, let's have you just share a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you came to be involved in this work.
Okay, so wow. My name is Amy Reiley. I am considered a leading authority on aphrodisiac foods. I have my master's degree in gastronomy, and I am the author of 5 aphrodisiac cookbooks.
Wow.
And one bundle of products called the Better Sex Bundle for Men, which is sort of a guide and support materials to help men learn how to eat to have the best sex life ever.
That is so cool. And it's something that would make sense, right? Like what you put into your body can affect how your body runs. I mean, we do that in terms of when it comes to dieting and being healthy and their brain food. So why shouldn't there be sex foods?
Yes. And in fact, I'm now working on a companion product, the Better Sex Bundle for women. It is taking longer because for women, what you put into your body becomes so much more complex because our hormone cycles are so much more complex than men's. So yeah, women we need to really consider what we're putting into our body and when.
And when, that's what I was going to say. It all depends on where you are in your cycle, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Fascinating. I always say we're way more run by the moon and the earth than we realize, aren't we?
Yes. And also for women, stage of life is also a
Absolutely.
huge influence. And men, it's just like, we're the same. We're old, but the same. And then that's it, right?
The machine still runs the same. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, exactly.
Well, how did you come to be involved in this specific area of food?
it happened quite organically for me. I just on a whim took a job in a winery tasting room right after college, and they had a really great education program for their staff. I learned a lot about wine. I happened to have had a great deal of journalism experience, and I was like, I'm going to write about wine. And because I had this young voice and I had legitimate experience, it was quite easy for me to get work writing about wine, and I really loved it. But then I got very, very sick, and it took a while to diagnose it. And it turned out the problem was a systemic yeast infection, which is like the most unsexy thing ever, in combination with a mold allergy, a pretty severe mold allergy. And
wow,
the cure was essentially a change of diet, luckily a temporary change of diet. The anti-candida diet is very drastic. It's really incredibly restrictive. And on top of it, I had to do an anti-mold diet. So, I mean, I was basically eating celery and smoked turkey. Or not even, no, I couldn't even have smoked turkey. It had to be like roast turkey. You can't have anything that has any kind of sugar of any kind at all.
Wow.
So yeah, it was really restrictive. But the amazing thing was, within weeks, I felt like a new person. It was so profound. And it was such a shock to me how much what you put in your body can affect how everything runs, your mood, your energy, it was incredible. And it had, a huge impact on me. I had been looking to diversify writing about more things than wine. And I was interested in food history, and I was looking for a topic that kind of would pique my interest. And then suddenly I became very interested in the nutritional side of food. And aphrodisiacs is really a combination of food history and nutritional science. And I was just drawn instantly to the topic from my experience and my work in gastronomy and food history. It was just a wonderful marriage for me. And so here I am.
It's always fascinating to me how people begin their journeys. And it always starts with something personal.
Yes.
And it's true though. And I'm really proud of myself that in some of the questions that I prepared ahead of time, the question brought up, how does food history play into different aphrodisiacs? And, there's chemicals in food. We don't think about food being science, but it is. Nutrition is science.
Right.
So that is very interesting to hear how that kind of catapulted you into this journey. Now, how did you kind of get started creating that platform for yourself from there?
Well, it actually, it all came together for me while I was working on my master's degree. And there was a lot of opportunity to do self-directed study. And the first time we were required to do self-directed study, I started looking at aphrodisiacs just to kind of see. And I was hooked. And so any opportunity from there, I concentrated on something to do with aphrodisiacs. I wound up doing my dissertation on the relationship between food and sex in American pop culture.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. So, it just all built up, one thing built upon the next. Yeah. Or built upon the previous.
And then all of a sudden you have this such a cool niche career, and the rest is history.
That's right.
So for people who may not know this word that we keep throwing around, aphrodisiac, can you just define for the audience what it is? What are some attributes of them? And what are some things that people might not know about them?
Sure. So an aphrodisiac is a substance. It doesn't have to be a food. Some substance that increases sexual desire and or sexual performance.
Okay. And I think that all of us have seen the trope within romantic comedies or romance or, books with there's always the roses, there's the chocolate. When, the guy messes up and he needs to apologize to his wife, he brings the chocolate. What are so that's the trope, right? But what are some misconceptions surrounding this idea of aphrodisiacs?
Well, so honestly, there's a misconception that most people think it's a myth. Or not most people, but a lot of people do. Like the FDA dismisses aphrodisiacs because they say, well, there is no food proven to directly raise sexual hormone levels, and that's how they're defining it. Even though if you look at a lot of foods, well, actually, yes, they are helping to, they are providing the building blocks to your sexual hormones. So,
sure,
I look at it a little differently, but a lot of people assume that they just don't work, that it's this funny cliche that you put in movies.
Absolutely. So other than the chocolate and strawberries, what are some other aphrodisiacs that people might not know about?
There are, let's see, I think I have 80 some on my website. So I run a website called eatsomething.sexy.com, and we have a page it's just a dictionary of aphrodisiac foods. And it's certainly by no means a complete list, but it's a fairly comprehensive list. And there's close to 100 fairly common, the majority, not all. Like I put blowfish on there, which is not a common food, thank goodness. It's if you don't know it, it's a Japanese delicacy, but it can be deadly if it's prepared incorrectly. It's just that people have a lot of interest in that as an aphrodisiac, so I wanted to put it there to kind of address that interest. But the majority of the foods on there are fairly common foods, like cucumbers, like cinnamon, or ginger. Chocolate, well, we talked about chocolate. Chocolate, is on there. So yeah, there's a lot of them.
And I mean, it's funny because, people joke about food as being like sex items, right? But many aphrodisiacs can be phallic shaped or shaped like either set of genitalia or the internal.
Yeah, in certain, culturally, sometimes a food would be declared aphrodisiac because of its appearance. Like avocado actually translates to testicle tree, which is, I think whatever man named that had a really inflated sense of self, because there's a size difference there. But yes, that is one sort of way to categorize aphrodisiacs. I think it's a little silly. Sure. And I've actually had to provide warnings before, like that's not an appropriate use of a banana or a cucumber, and it may give someone a terrible infection. So please don't do that.
Yeah, no. If we're going to be using things for the purposes of sexual pleasure, they should be not food.
No, they should not.
But that isn't to say that people can't incorporate food into their play, correct?
Correct, absolutely.
And how do you have ideas about for how people can do that, or are you mostly focused on like the science of the food and everything?
So I am more focused on, using either both the science to help people support a healthy libido, as well as using food for romance, just creating the atmosphere, creating sensuality with the food, not necessarily as play, although I do encourage it. And yesterday, I had a sex therapist tell me a really great use she likes to recommend to take a sip of sparkling water or sparkling wine, and then press your lips to your lovers and let the other person draw it out as though they're sucking it from, and then swirl it around in their own mouth. I was like, that is really an interesting sensory experience. Now, I am going to say, I am a total germaphobe and I will never try it. Okay? But for those, it definitely could create an incredibly sexy moment for sure. If you can do it.
Yeah. If that's your thing, I can see like the vulnerability required there, and like the closeness, and there's a little bit of taboo there because, you're sharing. Yeah. Huh, yeah. And just the fizziness of like a carbonated.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I like that. I don't know if I would try it either, because I'm also a little bit of germaphobe, but I like the idea. Well, we were talking a little bit about food science, food chemistry. So what's the journey of the history of food and the journey of food science, and how has that led us to what we understand now today about aphrodisiacs?
So, well, let's start with the word. The word aphrodisiac, it comes from Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of love. So that was in the Western world. This concept of aphrodisiacs really started with ancient Greek culture. Although, if you look in Eastern history, people gravitated toward the same idea as far back as that as well. So it's not necessarily, it's just that's since it's the Western word that we use, I tend to focus more on a better understanding of aphrodisiac use in Western culture. Although in traditional Chinese medicine, there are some fascinating aphrodisiac applications. That's for sure. So now I kind of went on a tangent and I forget what the rest of the question was.
No, you're good. It's how the chemistry of food and the history of food and dining play into what we understand.
So I mean, humans really wanted to use aphrodisiacs, use foods as sort of this sexual medicine from as far back as, possibly even further back than ancient Greece, but that's where they were named. And so this is, it's something that we've always wanted to have. If you look at cultures throughout history, you'll see use of food as an aphrodisiac. And what's interesting to me is I like to look at those time periods in history and look at what else was going on. Like, what were the diseases? What was the food scarcity? And oftentimes food was quite scarce. I mean, we don't, throughout most of history, people did not have the abundance of food that we have now.
Right.
And so you have to figure that they were getting results. Like, if they were using food this way, they must have been getting results. Like, it was important, and they noticed this. And so now we can look at it from the standpoint of food science and have a better understanding of, like, oh, they were really onto something, because this promotes testosterone production, or it increases nitric oxide, or all of these different things.
So basically, with hindsight, looking at how people were applying food to get results, just kind of through trial and error for them, but applying this modern idea of the science of nutrition to it.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
But now I was going to say, not all aphrodisiac applications historically or now or today have to do with nutrition. Some of them have a physiological effect. And definitely there is some psychology to it as well. There is someone invites you over for dinner for two and puts a plate of oysters in front of you. And like, it sends a message, right?
I guess it does. I think that oysters gross me out so much. For me, I'd be like, do you know me? But
all right. Nobody put a plate of oysters in front of Rachel.
But to be fair, I haven't delved too much into it. The person I'm dating is from the Mediterranean area, and so there's been a lot of experimenting with new foods there. So
wonderful. A lot of seafood.
A lot of seafood, which hasn't been my, I'm from Michigan. I'm a Midwest girl, meat and potatoes, and so dating somebody from the area of the Med, I'm like, oh wow, like this is completely different than, how I grew up. So, Sunday, St. Patrick's Day, and this poor guy is going to be subjected to my corned beef and cabbage and potatoes.
But you know what? It's a fun cultural experience. We all need to embrace them all, as weird as they may seem to us.
Totally. But there is, a lot of these ideas about, oh, okay, if this is put in front of you, like somebody brings you chocolate covered strawberries and you're like, okay, I guess I know what's on their mind,
Right.
So there is that psychology to it, and that physiology when you talk about, the shape of things.
And there's also things like coffee. Coffee is considered an aphrodisiac, largely because it gives you that little burst of energy, that quick burst of energy, but also because coffee is a mood enhancer. it helps improve your mood. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just telling my boss today that coffee makes me very anxious. It just raises my
Oh.
cortisol levels.
Oh, well. Not every aphrodisiac works for everyone.
It's true. Not every aphrodisiac is created equal for
Mm.
everyone. But I can totally see. I mean, like mango's an aphrodisiac, right? I'm not.
Oh, yes.
Okay, I thought so. Like mangoes or figs, like a lot of the fruits, I'm just
Yeah.
like, oh wow, like this is like.
Yeah.
I'm also, I don't know if you hold any stock in zodiac signs, but jokingly, like I'm a Taurus, and so having the food and the satisfaction from eating. Some people don't enjoy eating. They just do it because it keeps them alive.
Right.
And that's crazy to me, just because I enjoy the process of eating a meal so much. And I think that has something to do with it too. I can't exactly put the pieces together, but I imagine it has to.
Yes. It's funny. My husband, when we were first dating, actually used the words people chow. He said, I wish they just made people chow, like puppy chow. So that I could just, pour it in my bowl 3 times a day and keep going. And I was like, what's wrong with you? I just didn't understand. I have changed him. He definitely can enjoy food experiences, particularly like something that's a sensuous food experience. He can enjoy that very much now. However, getting him to sit through like a 3-4 course dinner is still, it's like a form of torture. It's a form of torture for him. Yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy. I mean, it's crazy to me, to each their own, but I'm like, oh yeah, if I could just like sit and sleep and eat and, make love all day, like that sounds great. So
yeah, it sounds perfect for me. Yeah.
Sounds like, but yeah, anyway, mangoes for me, it's like a process of eating something just feels sensual in many ways. So, well, okay. One of the things that I found the most fascinating, obviously the sexes are different. I mean, the anatomy of women is way more complex, and not only like physically, but because of the way that it's affected by the hormone cycles, as you were talking about, and less understood by medicine because medicine has been largely focused towards men for the history of medicine. But that's another topic. So how do different aphrodisiacs, like what are some aphrodisiacs that affect the sexes in different ways, and how do they change or heighten the experience?
So I work with a nutritionist named Delana Flagg. She, funnily enough, she came to me as my intern when she was going to cooking school. And she was so captivated by like this whole idea of the science of aphrodisiacs and how it could actually make you perform better in bed. She wound up getting her PhD in nutrition.
Wow.
Yeah. And so she and I worked on creating these lists. We call them the 10 best foods for men and the 10 best foods for women. And each with foods designed, and we could probably make a list of 20, to be honest. We left a lot of things off the list, I want to assure you, but we tried to make them fit in multiple, something from each kind of category, if you know what I mean. Like, for example, on women's, there's chocolate, strawberries, lentils, so it's like we wanted to kind of change it up a bit. Some more just nutrition dense things and some more things that are just compelling and tasty. And the same thing on the men's list. It has bison on it, which is what we propose as a great red meat alternative to beef or lamb for men.
Wow.
Yeah, it's more nutritious. It actually has a little more protein. It has there's less fat and more blood in the meat, which it just is a nutrition dense form of red meat. And, because we didn't want to tell men don't eat red meat at all, because that's traditionally, at least in American culture, that's man food, Right. So, and then on the men's list, we have other things like watermelon, And so we just try to bounce it around a little bit.
Things that are a little more expected and things that are less so.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, because and it's so funny that when it comes down to it, it's like, wow, biology really is, it's just very ever present. As much as we have evolved and grown and changed as humans, there just are some things that are just hardwired in.
Yes.
And I think that red meat thing that you're talking about, especially here in America, is really prevalent. Again, from the Midwest, thinking about, the guys that I grew up around, totally very much focused on the red meat. So are there any foods, not aphrodisiacs, are there any foods that are commonly troped, like in movies, in TV shows, in books, as being an aphrodisiac, but they're actually not?
No, it's funny. I can't think of any. Because I was going to say, sometimes I've seen people, ooh, pizza's sexy. But then there was a study on the aroma of pizza, and it's apparently arousing to a certain percentage of the population. So even a pizza apparently is sexy to some people. There are definitely foods that are bad choices for a romantic occasion, but I can't think of anything that's used as an aphrodisiac that really isn't.
That's good. It means people are doing the research, and I think a lot of people find pizza sexy. But that kind of leads you to another thing. So are any of these foods that are commonly known as aphrodisiacs, are any of them, a lot of them, it seems like, based on the examples that we've discussed, are lighter and, less dense foods?
Mm-hmm.
Because,
yes.
I'm thinking of myself. The last thing that I want to do when I've sat down to like a 4-course meal, that has had, I don't know, everything in front of me, the last thing that I want to do is be intimate, even if I'm feeling really connected to my partner, even if I'm feeling satiated, it's the last thing I want to do. Is that common in like a list of aphrodisiacs, is that they're not going to have that density as a lot of the other foods?
Oh yeah. I work with a lot of restaurants and hotels to create romance packages or Valentine's Day dinners. And I frequently have to talk to the chef and say, no, please, filet mignon is not, like, as decadent and wonderful as it may be, it is not a food for a romantic evening. Things like pureed potatoes, anything or a big plate of pasta.
Mm-hmm.
These are foods that the blood's going to go to your stomach to digest the food. That is not what you want on a romantic occasion. If the blood's gone to your stomach to digest the food, one, you're probably going to be a little more tired. Two, you need the blood flow to a different region.
Right.
If you're going to perform sexually. So, yes, that's why they tend to be lighter foods. Although, depending on how much you eat, that pizza isn't that light.
I was thinking about the pizza too.
Yeah.
But I guess that's true. You think about, I guess there's, what I'm kind of realizing is that ambiance does play into aphrodisiacs to some extent, but it can't be everything, because the ambiance of like a 4-course candlelit pasta dinner, in theory sounds really romantic and really sexy, but in practice,
and maybe that's a great opportunity to connect. Maybe that's a couple nurturing kind of meal, but you're probably not going to get it on afterwards. No.
Very interesting. Well, what about, so different aphrodisiacs can target different things, right? I think like one of the big things is libido, just creating an interest. So what are some aphrodisiacs that kind of play into that, increasing libido, and what are some that kind of play into
performance?
Like performance, or like I heard this rumor when I was in middle school that men and women should eat pineapple because they'll taste better.
Oh, that's so funny. Yes, I've spoken frequently about this one. So there is no scientific evidence that the pineapple juice thing works. However, well, no, you know what? There's enough anecdotal evidence that you can't disregard it.
Sure.
There's a lot of anecdotal evidence. So there has to be something to it. I have talked with some doctors about it, and one of them theorized, and this sounds spot on to me. It's probably the fact that the acidity of pineapple is simply diminishing bitterness. That's all it is. So presumably then orange juice would pretty much work as well. Or
Same
eating
thing.
a grapefruit, or, anything that's
Anything citrusy.
high in acidity. Yeah. Or even a cup of hibiscus tea, which is also very acidic. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I saw that on your list actually.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So taste, there might be some anecdotal evidence, but nothing necessarily hardwired that this is proven that.
Yeah.
Well, what about foods for arousal or foods for performance?
Ooh, okay. So where I like to start with this is water, which is not on your list of classic aphrodisiac foods, but for both arousal and performance, you need to be hydrated.
Oh, my boyfriend's going to love you. He's going to love you.
You do. You need to be hydrated. You rely on hydration for everything, for the movement of your muscles, for the production of semen, for vaginal lubrication.
Mm-hmm.
If we're not hydrated, we can't have properly hydrated. We can't have any of those things. And it also, particularly for men, can really impact performance. I actually had a urologist once say to me that if his patients drank enough water, he would probably have half the patients.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such
Okay.
a simple, easy thing to do. It's a simple solution. 8 glasses is not necessarily the right amount, so don't go by that. I know it's hard because everybody just wants a number. There's been some research, and it's very individual. For some people, it's 5 or 6 glasses. For people like me, it's more like 12.
Wow.
I get dehydrated very, very easily. So don't assume you're having your 8 and it's just right either. It's crazy, but true.
Water.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm almost 34 and people keep telling me, Rachel, you need to drink more water, and I'm getting better, but I'm still not where I need to be. But you sharing that might be the thing that gets my butt in gear.
Water is good. Yeah. So that's where I tell people to start. You want something for your libido. And then let's see. So as far as foods go, I'm trying to think what's a really good, like I want something that's like readily available and really just great for everyone. And, oh gosh. So, well, I'll just go with watermelon because it's fun and we're coming towards summer. And this one is particularly for men. And guess what? Watermelon helps you hydrate. So that's
true.
Good news for everyone. But watermelon contains a phytonutrient called citrulline, which scientists have theorized could really potentially be a natural Viagra. It has the ability to have a similar effect on your body. Now, how much watermelon do you need to eat in order to have that effect? I don't know. But certainly it's going to go toward helping men in that department. And that's a really good one that has some strong research behind it. So I kind of love talking about that.
And it can be a sexy one to eat too.
Yeah, watermelon can be super sexy.
Mm-hmm.
And watermelon juice can be so refreshing in summer. That's a favorite of mine. Add a little lime. Oh, the other thing you can do as a couple, sprinkle some chili on watermelon and then squeeze some lime on it and feed each other chunks of watermelon with, spicy watermelon. Oh, it's so good.
That sounds phenomenal. I never would have thought of putting those things together. Because you're compounding, because you said that chili is an aphrodisiac too,
right?
Correct?
Yes, chili is.
So you're combining like double whammy here.
Yeah.
Triple whammy because it's watermelon water and
and
chili.
that's an interesting one because that can influence. So chili is good for increasing desire to some degree.
Okay.
So you're increasing desire and you're increasing performance by eating that one together. So that's kind of fun. What I love about chilies, well, one thing that you don't think about, chilies actually have a lot of vitamin C. And, that's a benefit to your sexual health. We don't think of a lot of spices as having nutrition, but some of them really do. But the effect that I'm thinking of particularly with chili right now is that it raises body temperature. It brings some heat, which, you're a little more ready to tear off your clothing if you're feeling warm, right? but also it makes your tongue tingle. It makes your lips plump up. It makes your cheeks, it brings a little bit of a flush to your cheeks if you have enough of it. And that sort of glowy look to someone who's attracted to you, it kind of it equates to a sexual glow. So they get a little more turned on by looking at you while you're flushing from chilies. So it's a fun thing to play around with.
It's multifaceted for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Water, watermelon, chili. Got it. Taking notes. What about for like during the act? Like I know that people are probably, I know that a lot of men worry about sustaining their erection. So like what are there particular foods that can assist in that?
So for that's funny. I've never thought of that question that way before. I've always thought about just getting the erection. That's where the focus always is. I honestly don't. I'm sure there is an answer to that, a good answer to that, but I don't have it.
Okay.
Yeah. That is a first for me. I am rarely stumped, but that was a great one. Now I have some research to do.
Yeah, well, let me know.
Yeah.
Can add it to the introduction. Okay. Well, if people are curious about aphrodisiacs, but they've heard this idea that it's a myth and their partner is resistant, what advice do you have for people who want to experiment but have like maybe some shame around it, or have a partner who's resistant, or are resistant themselves?
Wow. You stumped me twice in a row here.
I can think that if my partner like were resistant to this, I think all I would say is like, what's the worst that's going to happen?
Well, there's that. Yeah, I mean, it's just food. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just food. So I can't even. I'm trying to picture in a context in which someone would have resistance, because like it's still just food, right? And most of it's healthy, natural foods. So it's not even like I'm trying to talk you into eating something weird, or it's not like a Cheeto. It's not full of chemicals. I mean,
you don't need to jump straight to the blowfish.
Right. And please don't. Yes.
You can take some steps in that direction.
Yeah. So it's hard for me to imagine what kind of resistance someone would have to tasty food.
I think too that like, I think about if I were to go to my partner and he'd be like, you're thinking about ways for us to absolutely, I'm on board, so it's almost what you don't like sex, like boohoo for you, maybe a trick question. Well, what about not directly related to, we talked about how watermelon can be really good for men, not directly related to sex, but because the menstrual cycle is inherently related to sex. What are some, I've heard the rumor that beets are really good for menstruation. What are some foods that are really good for women, specifically surrounding like her hormonal cycle, and how can that affect her sex life?
So, I mean, it really just more affects, it affects your whole being, more than necessarily specifically her a woman's sex life. I am currently learning more about this, and it's much more complex than I had once realized. So I don't want to, I don't want to get it wrong.
Sure.
Because it's incredibly complex. I mean, I don't want people to be fearful. Oh, I'm eating the wrong things at the wrong time of month.
Of course not. Yeah.
No, it's not like it's like obviously I've eaten whatever I want at any time of month all of my life, and I am doing okay.
We've been fine up until now.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. But for women who are more profoundly affected by their cycle, there really are ways that you can eat at certain points in your cycle. It's a fascinating area of women's health, and it's not necessarily, but it doesn't necessarily impact specifically sex,
right?
Yeah.
Right. But, menstrual cycles and women's cycles, because it's related to childbearing, which is related, it's all kind of, we're very complex people. But just as a person who suffers from PMDD, which is pretty intense, I'm just, I'm just like, oh, I'm curious. Like, is there anything that could help me like with that?
Oh, yes. What I've recently learned is that possibly even more impactful than diet is the way you exercise at different times of the month, which is something I had never considered until about a month ago. And I started learning about that. And I was like, wow.
You're hitting on my weak points. You're telling me the two things that everybody's always told me, water and exercise, and I'm just resistant.
But there are times a month when you need more gentle exercise.
Sure.
And there are times a month when you need a more energetic exercise. And there are times a month when you probably shouldn't do if you're specifically exercising for your cycle, then you shouldn't do the weight bearing exercise at this point. You should do it at that point. It's amazing. It's really, and it had never occurred to me that it could be, pinpointed by the point in your cycle.
It's really fascinating. I'm learning a lot more about that too. Just about like, I've been tracking more, like my partner actually started tracking my cycle just to get a sense of like when I might have food cravings and when I might, which I'm just like, get this guy a medal. Like, what an incredible thing to do. Well, let's talk about your cookbooks because we're running close on time here, but I want you to be able to talk. Oh my gosh, like you really are just like the foremost front runner person when it comes to this topic. So tell us a little bit about the different cookbooks that you have. You have the packages for men, and I believe you said you're currently creating the one for women.
Yes, which is why I've been doing this research on eating for your cycle. Yes. So I am working on the Better Sex Bundle for women coming out later this spring. And I do currently have available on eatsomething.sexy.com. You can find the Better Sex Bundle for men, which is a guide for men to eating for sexual health. And I touch on all the things that go along with that, like, exercise, getting enough sleep, what amount of alcohol is right for you, and all of these things, and trying to help people figure out how to individualize it for themselves, because there is no one answer for each man. They're all a bit different. And with that, so it's a book, but it's also a set of printable worksheets where you learn how to plan out a diet for the, your menu for the week so that you are eating for your sexual health. And then there's a journal, which is really just a check-in for you for each day to note which days you didn't get enough sleep and which days you felt more stress and what did that do to your sexual health. And water. Every day you have to check in on whether or not you had enough water and to know which things are impacting you. And one of the big ones people find is like when they change medication and they don't realize suddenly, they want sex all the time, or suddenly they're not performing the way they used to. And they don't even realize it was when they changed a medication or even an over the counter.
Oh yeah.
And so it's, the whole idea of this program is to help you help yourself. And I'm trying to give men every resource, to do that for themselves, and they will see results fairly quickly. I mean, I've had people say, within a month or two, they're starting to get real results from this program. And so now I'm working on the same thing for women, but when I started on it, I just didn't realize how much more complex we are. And so it's taken longer than I expected but I want to produce a good product that will help women in the exact same way. It's just, there's twice as much material.
Yeah. I was thinking in the car on the way over here that male genitalia has like the one word penis, but for women, it's broken down between vagina, which is the internal, and vulva, which is the external. Whereas like with a guy, it's just the one thing. Like it just, even just by nature of that, everything is so much more complex. So I definitely understand it taking more time. And I love the idea of tracking. I mean, again, like with somebody who has PMDD, like tracking my habits and figuring out where I notice shifting has been really, really helpful. It's difficult to get into the habit of doing it, but oh my gosh, like the way it has improved. Like I started running in the fall and I noticed, wow, okay, so my mood really improves when I run. Interesting.
Oh.
And it really is, the other thing I'm taking away from this is like, yes, what you eat is important, but it really is it's one piece of a bigger picture.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Bear in mind, it is a huge piece. It is a giant piece of the pie, but it is by no means the only piece, and without the other support blocks, just eating well is just not, you're not going to get as far as you might hope. And so, so I'm trying to help people like see all of the things, and maybe you don't want to do all of them, and that's okay, but at least you're seeing which ones you need and what you're missing.
Right. Yeah. It's a really great combo between like what and how you eat, how you exercise, how you take care of your mental health, how much water you drink, how you sleep, all of these things. It really is a big picture of health. So, well, Amy, we're running down on time here, but is there anything else that you want to tell the audience? And this is also your time to let us know where we can find you, where we can follow along with your journey. It's your time.
Definitely. So like I said, you can get the Better Sex Bundle for Men on eatsomething.sexy.com. And I recommend, if you want to know more about me or get more of this kind of information, please sign up for my mailing list. And you can also, once you've signed up, reply to one of my emails and I will write back. We can talk. That is definitely the best way to keep up with me, is just go to eatsomething.sexy.com and you can sign up for my newsletter on any page of the site.
Amazing. Well, Amy, thank you so much for chatting with me today. This has been a very interesting conversation, but also really helpful as we get into this season of spring and people are kind of starting to feel more alive. It's a good time to start tracking some of those habits and making some of those changes. So thank you so much for sharing everything. And we'll definitely be following along with you, me and my partner, because I'm fascinated by the subject now.
Oh, thank you so much. And I'm glad I got you intrigued.
And I hope you're intrigued too, listeners. Thank you for tuning in today. You have been listening to Wine, Dine, and 69. I am your host, Rachel Dalton, and let's keep talking.